Well, before I started Hardward, I had the honor of working for one of the U.S. congressmen, Congressman Trent Franks from Arizona, who's going to join us up here in a minute. And it was a really great thing because when I started working for him, he started the International Religious Freedom Caucus in Congress. At the time, 6 members joined him, and now there's over 60 members, which is a pretty significant percentage in the U.S. Congress of people that are diehard religious freedom supporters now, defending you and many others. Congressman Franks is now serving his 7th term in the U.S. Congress. He's a senior member of 2 committees, the House Judiciary Committee, which is critical because he sits on the Constitution Subcommittee to protect the original intent of the Constitution. And he also serves on the House Armed Services Committee, which is also important because he sits on the subcommittee that's going to protect us from nuclear warfare, with Iran in particular. He also co-chairs, in addition to the Religious Freedom Caucus, 2 other caucuses that have a lot of relevance to the things that were shared today. And that's the Orphan Caucus, the Orphan and Vulnerable Children Caucus, and the Adoption Caucus. Now, he has a huge heart for children, and anyone that talks to him can't talk to him without seeing a photo of his twin 8-year-old children that he's a very proud parent of. But he also today is going to share about what it's like to be a Christian in Congress and how his faith plays a role in the work that he does. But one more really important thing about the congressman, obviously I care about religious freedom, but one of the biggest things I think for many of the people in the room that we care about is that he has led the 3 most important pieces, and actually all of the most important pieces of legislation in the last 5 years, but there are 3 in particular on defending the right to life. And if any of these are passed in the Senate, they've already been passed in the House, they will overturn Roe versus Wade. So he is the one responsible for each of those bills. Prenda, the Pain Capable, and the Infant Born Alive Act. It's amazing that we even have to pass legislation on this, but that is the kind of heart that this man has, and it was an honor for me to be able to work for him and to introduce him to you tonight. So without further ado, Congressman Franks.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Can you hear me all right? Let me ask you all just to stand up for a minute. You've been sitting down a long time. I know how it is. You get to kind of get crinkled up here a little bit, and it's I want you to know, as you stand here, that it is a precious privilege for me to be here among all of you. Opal, I thought your comments along with Dr. Levy, there's just so many things that were said tonight, and I feel like I probably have a hard time trying to follow any of you. So thank you. I wonder if this microphone over here is on, creating some type of an echo. Is that right? All right, we're all right? I'm hearing an echo up here. But I just can't tell you how much I appreciate being able to be with you. You all go ahead and sit down now. I didn't want to... sometimes it helps just to kind of get worked out here a little bit. But Tina, there's no way that I can possibly follow that introduction. I mean, she obviously, when someone introduces someone that they've worked with a long time, they have to say a lot of things. And I just want you to know that I am a roughneck on a drilling rig that kind of stumbled onto the floor of the United States Congress. And without being self-deprecating, I sincerely don't know how it happened. It shocks me every day. I don't know how that I got to do this, and it just continues to be a privilege for me in every possible way. But I hope that somehow God is served in it some way. And there are a lot of things that I want to talk to you about tonight, and I know we have limited time. But let me just first start out with just a personal testimony, because I know the commonality that each of us has here is our faith in Christ. And when I was a little boy, I had a brother that came to me, and like Andrew came and got his brother Peter, and said, "Trent, I got saved." And I was very touched by what he said, because I knew that something of consequence had happened in his life. I didn't know what it was. He's 18 months younger, and I began to really listen to what he had to say. And at that point, I decided to go to the church where he'd gotten saved. And I went forward on a Sunday night, and I will just tell you very, very simply, that's the night I gave my life to Christ. They took me down to the basement, and I'm sorry, we've got an echo here of some kind. I don't know. Maybe I'll just use the microphone here. I'll try to turn this one off. All right. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulty here. We'll see how it works out. All right, let's try that again. It's nice to be with all of you here tonight. And I do want you to know, I know whenever you have a politician stand before you, you always wonder what their real motivation is. And I just tell you this from my heart tonight, that I'm not here to get you to endorse me. My district is 400 miles away, and you guys aren't going to. But I want you to know tonight from my heart that I endorse you, because you're natural encouragers. You're encouraging each other, and you encourage me, because I truly believe that if this country, if this world is to be saved, as a guy named E.V. Hill once said, we'll be saved by those who've been saved. And I truly am convinced that with all of the challenges that we have in this world, that God is capable of dealing with them all. I'm a miserable Baptist, and we believe that very fundamentally that I kind of call it the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faith. When they stood before the king and were threatened with being thrown in the furnace, which is what Congress essentially is, they said, "Listen, King, we're not really." I'm going to ad lib here a little bit. We're not afraid of you. We know that our God's able to deliver us. We know He is. But here's the deal: we don't know if He's going to or not. But it doesn't matter, because we're not going to serve anybody but Him. And to me, that's the great faith. And of course, they were tossed into the flames. And all of you know the story. The only thing that was burned was the ropes on their wrists. And somebody said, didn't we toss 3 of them in there? But I see 4 of them. And one of them looks like the Son of God. And in all of our challenges, it is important, especially in this day and age when we see the things that Opal showed us and some of the terrible heartaches that are out there, is that the Son of God is walking around in the flames with us, and we're all right. It's going to be okay. And sometimes we forget that always He has used people that are kind of broken vessels. I heard something that's kind of touched me a little bit that I wanted to kind of relate to you here. It seems like all through the Bible, God has used broken vessels of some kind. And so I thought this was pretty cute how God uses inadequate people or somehow flawed people. Noah was a drunk. Abraham was too old. Isaac was a daydreamer. Jacob was a liar. Leah was ugly. Poor girl, Joseph was abused. Moses had a stuttering problem. Gideon was afraid. Samson had long hair and was a womanizer. Rahab was a prostitute. Jeremy and Timothy were too young. David had an affair and was a murderer. Elijah was suicidal. Isaiah preached naked. I hope you guys don't do that here, do you? Jonah ran from God. Naomi was a destitute widow. Job lost his children and went bankrupt. John the Baptist ate bugs. Peter denied even knowing Christ. The disciples fell asleep praying in Gethsemane. Martha worried about everything. The Samaritan woman was divorced many times. Zacchaeus was too small. Paul was too religious. Timothy had an ulcer, and Lazarus was dead. God uses flawed people, and we should all be very grateful for that. And I guess I'm just here to say to you that no matter how flawed we are, God has put a great hammer in our hands. And to be Christians in America is one of the most unbelievable gifts and one of the greatest opportunities and platforms that you could ever have in any circumstance. I don't know how Opal would do in a place in Bangladesh being able to tell her message, but here she has a platform that can shake the world. And with all the challenges this country faces, and I'm here to tell you folks, we face some profound challenges. Now, I'm not here to be partisan. I'm just not here to talk to you about politics, but I am here to try to tell you the truth about some of the challenges this country faces. I have the privilege of chairing the Constitution Subcommittee, as Tina said, and that means, you know, we want to try to protect the Constitution. Now, all members of Congress raise their right hand and swear before God that we will defend and support the Constitution. And yet, it hangs by a thread. And in the next 3 or 4 months, it could be vitiated permanently, depending on what the outcome of the election is. And I would just have to say to you, I beg all of you to pray that God's will be done. Because what I'm afraid is that somehow he's going to look at America with all the directions that we've been going and say, okay, thy will be done. And if that happens, it could be a very dark future for our children. And we cannot let that occur if we can help it. You know, when we consider history, the last great Christian nation on earth was Tsarist Russia. And when the Bolsheviks came, everything changed. And it is important that Christians understand the stewardship they have as being Christians in the United States of America. This is the greatest republic in the history of the world. This is the unipolar superpower of the planet. No one has affected the world like this country has. Now, I say that because the country is predicated on this notion that all of us are created, and that's what makes us equal. And that is distinctly a Christian theological perspective. And sometimes we forget that the very heart and the very purpose of America, the very thing that called us into existence, was this Declaration of Independence that more than anything else was a theological doctrine. And somehow, if we step back from that, the whole world could suffer in the most profound ways. The guy that used to be in the position that I have as chairing the Constitution Committee, a guy named Daniel Webster, great Christian champion over 100 years ago, he said, hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and to the republic for which it stands. For miracles do not cluster. And what has happened once in 6,000 years may never happen again. So hold on to the Constitution. For if the American Constitution should fall, there will be anarchy throughout the world. Wow. And he was more right today, if he said it today, than he was then. We have so much to be thankful for, so much to be grateful for, and yet there's so much at stake. And sometimes I remind people in America that there's only 2 ways to change policy in this country. We either elect the right people, as Solomon said, you know, that when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, and when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. We forget that in this country, it's not the politicians that are in control, it's the people. They are the ones, but what they decide to do makes all the difference, because we either elect the right people or we beg the wrong ones to do the right thing. Those are our 2 options. And so I pray that somehow we understand the stewardship of this country. In the Congress, I have focused primarily on doing everything that I possibly can to protect this foundational concept called innocent human life. You know, because if we get that one right, our entire Constitution and our Declaration are predicated on the protection of innocent human life. And if we get that one wrong, nothing else matters. And people say, well, they wonder, why are you so focused on life, and why are you so focused on that central message? And I think there are a lot of reasons. I think partly it's the theology that we hold, you know. I think that for those of us that believe that Jesus, when he said, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you've done it unto me, that's a call to standing for and protecting the innocent. But each person has a little different angle in life. I think one of the things that moved my heart, and I don't often tell it, but an old man told me a story. He said that when his first child was born, that the child's skull didn't fuse together properly, and the roof of the mouth was missing, and the flesh was open, and the doctors, this a long time ago, said, well, this child isn't going to make it. He can't be breastfed or bottle fed, and so the best thing to do is to do away with him in a merciful manner, because if he lives, he'll never be able to speak intelligibly, and he'll probably potentially have mental problems and things like that. And so the man said, no, we're going to take him home, do the best we can with him. We're going to do what we can at least. I'll make a machine to feed him, because they said you can't feed him. You can't be breastfed or bottle fed. And they took the child home, did the best they could, and after losing weight, the child began to thrive. And so they took him to the what they called at that time the Crippled Children's Hospital. It's a Shriners Hospital today. And they operated on the child. Somebody said 11 operations. Their child had 11. They operated on this child 11 times before he was 9 years old. And he grew up big and strong and grateful for life. And that story touched me very deeply, because the old man that told it to me was my dad. And I was the child, So, and I say that to you not to don't misunderstand. I'm grateful. I mean, I don't even have a speech impediment by the grace of God. I can perpetrate monotonic, polysyllabic obfuscation, semantic gymnastics, and verbal circumlocution with the best of them most of the time. So the opportunity that is afforded to me is beyond belief. But it was because I was born in America. And I just pray that somehow as Americans we don't forget what greatness that we've been given, and that we just be good citizens and understand that God put us here and gave us everything that he gave us so that we would reach out to the world. This is a gift of God to the whole world. And somehow if we do our job, I know he'll do his. He always does. He's a sovereign Lord of the universe that knows what every molecule had for breakfast. And I'm convinced that he has a plan for this country. But I am also convinced that somehow, and I don't understand it all, man's responsibility and God's sovereignty, it's hard sometimes to know where they overlap. But I do believe with all of my heart that he has called us to go out and preach the gospel to every creature. And this country, 87% of all the gospel missionaries that preach the gospel or go out into the world to carry the gospel or come from or funded by someone in America, 87% of them have some direct connection with America. So if this country fails, the greatest gospel outreach in the world is diminished. And that cannot happen on our watch. It just must not. And I think that sometimes we need to bring it down into something that we can easily understand, that God put us here not to be able to bring his slippers to him, because we can't really honor him by doing something directly for him. The only way that we can really honor God is to help the rest of his children. Isn't that true? I mean, I look at my own children and I wonder what anybody could do that would mean more to me than doing something to take care of my children. And I believe that's the way God feels. And so I wanted to close tonight with a little story that I think kind of puts it in perspective. It happens to be a true story, and it's always kind of reminded me of why we are all here. It happened off the coast of Scotland. We had a guy from Scotland down San Diego last night that was just wonderful to talk to, and he was familiar somehow with the story. But back in about the 1600s, a big ship, wooden ship, went to pieces off the coast of Scotland, and they didn't have large lifeboats, so everybody just had to get in the boat and try to get to shore as quickly as they could. And as they came ashore, the townspeople came running down, and they said, "Did you get everybody?" And they said, "No, we couldn't get everybody. The boat wasn't big enough. There's a lot of people clinging to pieces of the ship out there in the water tonight. The storm is still going." And so they said, "Well, we got to do something." And a man named John stepped forward, and he said, "Who will go with me? We'll take this boat, we'll take every boat we have, and we'll go out there and get as many of them as we can." And so they started to get ready, and then they heard a cry in the group, and a woman came forward, and she says, "No, John, you can't go." It was his mother. She said, "You cannot go. I've lost your father at sea. He went to sea and died. And then your brother went to sea, and we've never seen your brother William since. For years he's been gone. I've lost your father. I've lost your brother William. Don't ask me to lose you too." And basically he just said, "Mom, I've got to go. Because if I don't, they will all die." So he went on out, and people followed him because of his courage. And they went out, and the townspeople built big bonfires and prayed. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, they heard an oar out in the water. And somebody yelled, "Are you out there?" in the dark. And they heard a voice come back, "Yes, we're out here." They said, "Did you get everybody?" And they said, "Yes, we got everybody." And then John yelled to shore. He says, "Tell my mother I'm okay. And tell her my brother William is with me." And I think sometimes, folks, that's the real story. You know, the story of the gospel is really about a Savior that went out into the storm to find his lost children. And I pray that we reflect that, because whether it's the declaration, whether it's the least of these, our little brothers, it's all about a William somewhere. And William is that one spoken of in those instances. And you see, William is black. He is white. He is young. He is old. He is unwanted. He is rich. He is poor. He's a little unborn baby. He's an unwed mother. He's a widow. He's a lost street child in Brazil. He's an American. He is from India. He's an aimless vagabond. He is a young Muslim boy searching for truth and purpose in an environment of hate and blindness. He's a little 6-year-old girl sold into slavery by ISIS for 50 cents. He's a dying soldier. He is an American. He is from India. He's a thief in prison. He's an unwanted baby girl floating down the ocean, down the river. He's a broken-hearted stranger. He is homeless. He is hungry. He is sick. He is abandoned. He is the last blind, wretched, sinful, hopeless soul that anyone on earth could ever love. But to Jesus, he's treasure. And so I pray that as we live this life, we will look to that moment when we will cross over the threshold of eternity and look into the eyes of the glorified Christ. And we'll be able to look up to him and let our hearts cry be very, very clear. Lord, I've come safely home, and I've brought you treasure. My brother William is with me. And I pray that we can do that, and I pray that we can do all that we can as Americans to make sure that this country continues to be the beacon of freedom for the whole world, because so many people are counting on us. God bless you for encouraging me. God bless you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Congressman Franks. Congressman Franks, would you come back up? I've asked Connie Salos, who's one of our board members, to come up and pray for you.
You bet. Let's pray. Father, thanks for this tremendous blessing and surprise we've had tonight to have a politician come to the Barnabas group that we want to listen to. He speaks your truth, and he speaks it in a way that's powerful. And our prayer tonight is that with all the challenges in the world and the challenges of our country, you've placed him in a special place, in a specific place. And we pray tonight that you would continue to offer the audience that needs to hear his words, the platform, the influence, and that you would continue to provide him the words to go with all this charisma so that this light that you need to show in Washington, D.C. will continue to shine, and that ears will be opened, and that we can take encouragement tonight in a year that's chaotic and confusing and frustrating and causes us to sometimes question whether you're in control or not. We count on that, we believe it, we trust it, and we so appreciate tonight these words from Congressman Franks, and we ask your continued blessing, strength, and opportunities for him going forward. We ask these things tonight in your name. Amen.
Well, we started tonight by seeing a short video on a young child, really, who had a heart for soccer balls and getting them to Africa. And we found out that for $50, we could provide a leg that could allow a person to walk or dance. Then we heard the impact of one Barnabas Group couple had on a ministry hardwired, what they had did just through their prayers and their efforts. Then we discovered the power of imagination and that it's a gift from God, one that we so often misuse. We learned more about sex trafficking than we knew certainly before we arrived. We learned what International Sanctuary is doing in India and wants to do beyond. We learned from a million kids what Satan is doing in our own backyard. And we are encouraged, blessed, and challenged by Congressman Trent Franks. I hope you had a good evening. I hope if you're a guest that you decide to join the Barnabas Group today. And I hope that you have a safe drive home. Thank you very much for coming. God bless you guys.